Mabel Okafor was 87 years old when she walked onto the Family Feud stage and answered a question that stopped Steve Harvey mid-sentence. Not because the answer was wrong, because it was the most right thing anyone had said on that stage in a very long time. 87 years old. 64 of them spent doing the same thing every single morning at 5:15 a.m. in the dark before anyone else in the house was awake. One habit. 64 years. The same motion, the same order, the same reason. And when Steve Harvey asked her to explain it, not because the show required it, but because he could not help himself, what she said made a man who laughs for a living stand completely still. Some things, it turns out, are older than game shows. Some habits outlast everything except the love that made them. There is a kind of television that shows you people, not characters, not archetypes. Not curated versions of what a person wishes they were or what a producer decided they should be. Just people. Family Feud at its best is that kind of television. It takes ordinary families, people who work regular jobs and argue about the remote and have inside jokes that make no sense to anyone outside the house. And it puts them in a room with a host and a clock and a question, and something true almost always comes out. Steve Harvey has been the host long enough to know the difference between a moment and a moment. He has stood at that podium and watched people reveal themselves. In the gap between the answer they meant to give and the answer that came out, in the pause before an answer that turned out to be the number one answer, and the pause before one that was not, in the laugh that arrived too fast, and the silence that came when nobody expected silence. He knows what most moments look like. And he knows, in the first few seconds of a taping, whether the family in front of him is going to give him something ordinary or something he will still be thinking about on the drive home. On a Tuesday afternoon in mid-September, the Okafor family from Mobile, Alabama walked into the studio. Steve Harvey was thinking about that drive home before they reached the podium. Mabel Okafor was 87 years old. She was the kind of woman who made a room adjust its posture. Not through intimidation, there was nothing cold in her, nothing hard, but through a quality of presence that made the air around her feel more deliberate. Like the room was taking her seriously and had decided everyone else should too. She was 5'2" and had been 5'2" since she was 19. Which she would tell you was a fine height for a woman who had always had enough sense to stand on a chair when she needed to reach something, and enough pride not to ask anyone to do it for her. She had been born in Demopolis, Alabama in 1937, the fifth of 7 children in a house where there was never quite enough of anything except work and faith, both of which she had absorbed early and carried forward intact. She had moved to Mobile at 21, the year after she married Bernard Okafor, and she had lived in the same house on Beaumont Street for 63 years. Bernard had died 9 years ago. She still lived in the house. She always would. Bernard Okafor had been 62 years married to Mabel when he died, a fact she stated the way you state a fact that is also the central organizing event of your life. They had met at a church social in Demopolis in the spring of 1960. He had been 26. She had been 23. He had walked across the room to her because, he always said, she was the only woman there who was not trying to look like she was enjoying herself. She was just enjoying herself. He had asked if he could sit. She had said he could sit if he could think of something worth saying. He had thought for a moment. Then he had said, "I believe the biscuits here are under-seasoned." She had looked at him. She had agreed. They were married 8 months later. The load-bearing object arrived in the 3rd month of their marriage. Bernard had been working at the dockyard in those years, long shifts that started before dawn, and Mabel had been working as a seamstress, and their hours crossed in strange ways. He left before she was fully awake. She was home before he returned. They ate supper together every evening, but the mornings were his alone, and she had not liked this. She had not liked him leaving in the dark without her being awake to say goodbye. She had told him this. He had listened. He was a man who listened the way few men listen, with his whole attention without assembling his response while she was still talking. Then he had said, "Then wake up with me. I have to be at the shop by 7, she had said. I leave at 5:15, he had said. I will be gone before 6. You can sleep again after. And what would we do, she had said, in the hour between 5:15 and 6? He had thought about it. We could drink coffee, he had said, and we could talk or we could not talk. Either way, we would be awake together. She had considered this. All right, she had said. The next morning she had gotten up at 5:10. She had made coffee the same way she made it now. 64 years later, in a percolator she had replaced twice, but always with the same model, and she had sat across from her husband in the kitchen, and they had been awake together. They had done this every morning for 62 years. Every morning that Bernard was in Mobile and not traveling. Every morning that Mabel was not ill and not away. Every morning without fail, through the raising of 3 children, through 2 house repairs that required temporary relocation, through 4 decades of shift changes and schedule adjustments, through the long, slow adjustment of retirement when the 5:15 alarm no longer meant anything practical but meant everything else. Every morning. Then Bernard died 9 years ago on a Thursday in November. And the next morning, a Friday, the first morning, Mabel had gotten up at 5:10. She had made coffee. She had sat in her chair. She had sat in his chair too, both chairs moving between them. She had drunk 2 cups of coffee in the dark kitchen of the house on Beaumont Street in the hour before Mobile woke up, and she had talked to him the way she had always talked to him in the morning. About small things, about nothing, about everything, about what she was thinking and what she was worried about, and what had made her laugh yesterday, and what she was going to make for supper. She had done this every morning for 9 years. Her children knew she got up early. They did not know what she did in the hour between. The family had applied for Family Feud because her granddaughter Talia had submitted the video as a tribute to Mabel's 87th birthday in July. Talia was 29. She had inherited her grandmother's posture and her grandmother's talent for walking into a room and making it feel like it had been waiting for her. She was a pediatric nurse, a fact she wore quietly, the way people who have chosen work that matters tend to wear it, not because they are modest, but because the work itself already says enough. The rest of the team, Imani, no, wait, different family, check name bank. Talia's mother, Esther, 58, who taught 3rd grade and had the patient, measured energy of a person who had spent decades explaining things to people who were not yet ready to understand them. Then Jerome, 34, Esther's son and Talia's older brother, who sold insurance and had the organized, forward-leaning posture of a man who believed that the future was something you could prepare for if you started early enough. And Yolanda, 26, Talia's younger sister, who was in her final year of a nursing program and had shown up to the taping with color-coded flashcards, one of which, it turned out, she had made specifically about Family Feud survey psychology. The flashcard did not help. It was comforting to have made. And then there was Mabel, at the center of the family, not pushing anyone aside, just there. The way a fireplace is there in a house, not dominating the room, producing warmth that everyone unconsciously arranged themselves around. She was wearing a pale gold blouse and earrings that had been Bernard's mother's. She had worn them for every occasion that mattered since Bernard gave them to her on their 10th anniversary. She touched them once briefly when the studio lights came on. Nobody on the production team asked about them. Talia noticed. She always noticed things about her grandmother. She had spent 30 years noticing things about her grandmother and filing them away with the careful attention of someone who understood, without being told, that the things you notice about people you love are the things you will want to have when they are gone. She was not ready for Mabel to be gone. She was also not afraid of it in the way that Mabel had taught her not to be afraid of endings, by demonstrating over the course of a long and full life that love does not end with the ending. It just changes form. She had not expected that lesson to arrive on a game show. The taping started at 2 in the afternoon. The Okafors, the name belonging to the family through Bernard, whom Mabel had become when she married him at 23 and had remained ever since, were matched against the Pryor family from Worcester, Massachusetts. The Pryors were young. The oldest among them was a woman of about 40, the mother, and the rest were grown children in their 20s who had the quick, city-sharpened reflexes of people who had grown up where everything moved fast and hesitation cost you something. They were quick, confident. A little loud in the way that covers nerves. Jerome observed this and said quietly to his mother, Esther, "They're faster." Esther said, "Mabel is sharper." Jerome said, "Mabel is 87. Esther looked at him. "I know how old Mabel is," she said. Jerome looked at his grandmother, who was standing with her hands folded in front of her, watching the studio with the calm and attentive expression of a woman who had been to enough things in 87 years to know that the first 5 minutes of something told you everything you needed to know about it. He decided Esther was probably right. Steve Harvey came through the contestant area in the warm-up, and when he reached the Okafor family, he stopped at Mabel. "Ma'am," he said, "how old are you if you don't mind me asking?" 87, she said. Steve looked at the audience. 87 years old, folks, back to Mabel, and you look like you have been here before. You have that settled look. "I have never been here before in my life," she said. "Then how do you explain looking so settled?" She considered this. "When you get to my age, settled is what happens when you stop being surprised by things." "You stop being surprised? By most things," she said. "I can still be surprised. It's just harder." "What would surprise you?" She looked at him evenly. "Something that hadn't happened in 87 years, she said. The audience laughed. Steve laughed. He pointed at her and shook his head in the way he shook his head at things that genuinely pleased him, a small private pleasure made public. Talia, standing behind her grandmother, was smiling in the way you smile when someone who matters to you is being exactly themselves in a room full of people. The main game started. The Okafors played well. Esther was methodical and correct. Jerome was fast and often wrong, but fast enough that the wrong answers came with energy. Yolanda, despite or perhaps because of the flashcards, gave one answer, dentist, when asked to name a place with a waiting room that was not on the board, but that she defended with such confident reasoning that the audience started nodding before the buzzer sounded. Talia played quietly and well the way she did everything, not showing the effort, just producing the result. Mabel played round two. The category was things you find in a grandmother's house. Steve had barely finished reading it when Mabel said, hard candy in a dish. Number one answer, 38 points. The audience erupted. Steve Harvey did not attempt to contain his reaction. He spread his arms. He looked at the booth. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at Mabel, who was standing at the podium with the expression of someone who had known from the beginning how this was going to go. Ma'am, Steve said, how did you know that? I am a grandmother, she said. I have a dish. I know what's in it. Well, Steve made a sound that was not quite a word. We could have just asked you to write the board from memory, is what you're telling me. You could have, she agreed. But this is more fun. She was not wrong. The Okafors won the main game, 398 to 362. It was close. The Pryors fought hard, and the youngest one, a kid of maybe 22 who had been watching everything with the wide, absorbing attention of someone filing it all away, landed two top answers in the final round that made the room appreciate him. But the Okafors held on. Now it was fast money. Talia was selected to go first. Before she stepped behind the screen, she found a moment to stand next to her grandmother. She did not say anything complicated. She said, I love you, Grandma. Mabel looked at her. I know you do, she said. Go answer the questions. Talia smiled. She stepped behind the screen. Mabel stood at the podium, hands folded, waiting. Talia answered her 5 questions in 20 seconds with the calm efficiency of a pediatric nurse managing something that required precision without showing the precision. Question 1, name something people do first thing in the morning. Coffee, she said. Number 2 answer, 22 points. Question 2, name a reason someone might cry at a movie. Someone dies, she said. Number 1 answer, 41 points. Question 3, name something a person collects that takes over their house. Books, she said. Number 3 answer, 14 points. Question 4, name an animal known for being slow. Turtle, she said. Number 1 answer, 45 points. Question 5, name something you do on a porch. Rock, she said. In a rocking chair. Number 2 answer, 18 points. Total, 140 points. She needed 60 more from Mabel. She came out from behind the screen and rejoined the family. Jerome gave her a look that meant he was calculating. Yolanda checked something against the flash card, which was technically not allowed at this point, but which nobody stopped her from doing. Esther squeezed her daughter's arm. Mabel was already walking to the podium. She walked the way she always walked, which was the same way she had always walked, with no urgency and no uncertainty, the gait of a woman who had decided decades ago that the destination was worth reaching and that rushing did not bring it closer. Steve met her at the podium. Mrs. Okafor, he said, your granddaughter scored 140 points. You need 60 more to win the $30,000 prize. Are you ready? I am ready, she said. You're not nervous? No, not even a little. She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to most things. A little bit of something, she said, but I don't think it's nervous. What do you think it is? She looked at him with the level eyes of a woman who had learned in 87 years that the exact word for a feeling was important. Glad to be here, she said. That's what I feel. The audience made the warm sound that audiences make when someone says something that doesn't try to be moving and moves them anyway. Steve set the clock. Question 1, name something people do first thing in the morning. Talia had answered coffee. Mabel knew she'd need a different answer. She did not pause. Sit with someone, she said. The board checked. Number 1 was shower. Number 2 was coffee. Number 3 was stretch. Number 4 was check phone. Sit with someone was not on the board. The X sounded, but Mabel was already moving to question 2, unhurried, the way she moved through everything. Question 2, name a reason someone might cry at a movie. Talia had answered, someone dies. Mabel needed something different. Remembering, she said. The board checked, not on the board. X question 3, name something a person collects that takes over their house. Letters, she said, not on the board. X question 4, name an animal known for being slow. Talia had taken turtle. Mabel said snail. Number 2 answer, 11 points. Question 5, name something you do on a porch. Talia had said rock in a rocking chair. Mabel, without hesitation, said, watch the morning. The board checked, not on the board. X the buzzer sounded. The screen revealed the final tally, 11 points, 1 answer. Total combined, 151, 49 short of the $30,000. The Okafors had not won. The audience sighed in the collective way that audiences sigh when something doesn't go the way it was supposed to go, the sound of 200 people releasing a hope they had been quietly holding. Esther closed her eyes for 1 second. Jerome put his hands in his pockets. Yolanda looked at the flashcard, not accusingly, just with the look of a person wondering what it had gotten wrong. Talia watched her grandmother. Mabel was looking at the board, at the X marks, at the answers that had not been her answers. She was looking at them with the patience of a woman who had lived long enough to understand that most things turn out to be about something other than what you thought they were about when they started. Steve Harvey was looking at her too, not with the host's look, with the other one. "Mrs. Okafor," he said, "can I ask you something?" "You may," she said. "Your first answer was sit with someone. Your second was remembering. Your third was letters. Your fifth was watch the morning." He paused. "Those aren't survey answers. Those are something else." He stopped. He looked at her. "Who were you sitting with?" he asked. The studio held its breath in the particular way that a studio holds it when a question has just been asked that is too real for the format and the format has not yet figured out what to do about it. Mabel looked at Steve Harvey. She was not surprised by the question. She had been waiting, in some way she could not have articulated, for someone to ask it for 9 years. "My husband," she said, 2 words. "Bernard," she added. "He passed 9 years ago this November." A murmur moved through the audience, not sympathy exactly, not yet. Recognition, the murmur of people who know what loss is and have just heard someone name it plainly. "I'm sorry," Steve said. "Thank you," she said. "He was a very good man." "How long were you married?" 62 years, she said. "We met at a church social in Demopolis." He sat down next to me and said the biscuits were underseasoned. I told him he was right. We were married 8 months later. She paused. He always knew how to start a conversation. Steve Harvey smiled, not a performance smile, the real one, the one that reached his eyes and changed the shape of his face. "Mrs. Okafor," he said, "when you answered sit with someone, you meant every morning with Bernard." "Every morning," she said. "For 62 years, he worked early. He left at 5:15. I started getting up with him in the first year of our marriage so he wouldn't leave in the dark without someone awake to say goodbye. We would drink coffee and talk, every morning." "Every single morning," Steve said. "Every single morning," she confirmed. "For 62 years, the audience was still. "And then he passed," Steve said. "And then he passed," she said. Steve let that sit for a moment. "What happened the next morning?" he asked. This was the question. The family had not heard Mabel answer this question. Not in 9 years. Not because they had not been curious, not because they had not loved her and watched her and wondered about the early mornings, but because Mabel had always been the kind of woman whose private territory was legible. You could feel the edge of it, you could choose not to cross, and they had chosen not to cross. Talia had her hand over her mouth. Esther had gone very still. Jerome had stopped calculating anything. Yolanda's flashcard was at her side, forgot. "The next morning," Mabel said, "I got up at 5:10, same time as always." She looked at Steve with the clear, even eyes of someone telling a story they have been living for so long it no longer hurts the same way it once did but has not stopped being true. "I made the coffee. I sat down in my chair, and I looked at his chair across the table." She paused. "And I thought, I cannot just sit here looking at an empty chair for the rest of my life." "So what did you do?" Steve said. "I moved to his chair," she said. "I sat in his chair, and I had my coffee there, and I talked to him the way I always did in the morning." A woman in the third row made a sound that was not quite a word. "You talked to him," Steve said. "The way I always did," she said. "About what I was thinking, what I was worried about, what had made me laugh the day before, what I was going to make for supper." She looked at her hands for a moment. "He's a very good listener. He did not stop being one just because he died." Steve Harvey was very still. He had been very still for most of this conversation. But now he was the particular stillness of a man who has just heard something that has located something in him, something personal and specific, something that has nothing to do with being a host and everything to do with being a person who has also lost people. He did not speak for a moment. "Every morning," he finally said. "Every morning," she said. "For 9 years." He looked at the audience. The audience looked at him. Nobody made a sound. Then Talia, who had been standing 6 feet away, who had spent 30 years noticing things about her grandmother and filing them carefully away, who had known about the early mornings without knowing what the early mornings contained, Talia took 2 steps forward. She stopped. "Grandma," she said, her voice was careful. "You do this every morning." "Every morning," Mabel said. "And you never told us." Mabel looked at her granddaughter. "You never asked," she said, simply, without reproach, just the fact of it. Talia looked at the fact of it. It was not a small fact. It was the kind of fact that reorganizes the understanding of things around it, that reaches back through 9 years of mornings and says, there was more happening than you knew, and the more that was happening was this. This woman every morning at 5:10 in the dark, before the house woke up, before the day began. Coffee, his chair, 64 years of the same hour and not one of them empty. I didn't tell you, Mabel said to Talia, because it was between me and Bernard, and it still is. I'm only telling it now because this man asked me a question and I have never been able to tell a lie at a direct question. She looked at Steve. My mother did not raise me for that. Steve Harvey looked at her. He had been hosting game shows for a long time. He had been talking to people for longer. He had learned, somewhere in the arc of a career spent asking questions and watching people answer them, that the real answer almost never arrived at the obvious moment. It arrived when the person had been in the room long enough to feel safe, or when the question found the exact word that fit the exact place where the real thing was held. She grieves alone, a wife had said on a Wednesday in October. He sat with someone, an 87-year-old woman had just said on a Tuesday in September. Different answers, same truth. The truth of what people do with love when they have nowhere left to put it. They put it somewhere, they make a place. They go there every morning in the dark, and sometimes a game show asks about it, and sometimes they answer. Steve Harvey looked at the family. He looked at Talia, at Esther, at Jerome, at Yolanda. He looked at Mabel. Mrs. Okafor, he said, can I ask you one more thing? You can ask me anything, she said. It was the same thing Ruth Calloway had said 2 weeks later on a Wednesday in October. He did not know that yet. He would not connect those two tapings until much later when a producer mentioned it offhand. But the phrase landed the same way both times, the way an open door looks from either side, like permission. When you go there every morning, Steve said, in his chair, with your coffee, and you talk to him. He stopped. Does it help? Mabel thought about this. She thought about it the way she thought about everything that deserved thinking, fully, without hurrying. It's not about help, she said finally. What is it about? It's about keeping the morning the way it was, she said. The morning was ours, 62 years of mornings, and they were ours, and I decided, she paused. I decided that 62 years of something real does not stop being real just because one of the people who made it real is gone. The morning is still ours. I am still in it. He is still in it because I am still in it, and I am carrying him the way you carry someone you love for long enough. She looked at Steve with the clear eyes of a woman who had decided, sometime in the first year of her widowhood, exactly what she believed and had found nothing since to change her mind. He is not gone from the morning. He just doesn't drink his coffee anymore. The woman in the third row had given up on everything. A man in the 8th row who had come with his wife and had been enjoying himself thoroughly and had not been expecting any of this was looking at his wife in a way that he would not be able to explain afterward, but that she would understand completely. Jerome, organized, forward-leaning, prepare for the future Jerome, had both hands over his face. Yolanda was holding Esther's hand. Talia was looking at her grandmother with an expression that was not quite grief and not quite joy, but was the thing that lives in the space between them, the feeling of seeing someone you love clearly all the way for perhaps the first time. Steve Harvey had been on this stage for over a decade. He had been speechless twice. This was the third time, not the loud kind of speechless, not shocked, not thrown, the quiet kind. The kind where the words that would normally come next simply do not arrive because what has just been said has filled the space where they would go. He looked down at the podium. He looked back up. He looked at the audience. The audience was waiting for him. They were always waiting for him. That was the job. They felt it, and then they waited to see how he felt it, and then they felt it more because he named it. He named it. That, he said, is the most beautiful thing I have heard on this stage. Not performing it. It was simply true. 62 years of the same morning, he said, and then 9 more alone but not empty, because you decided that it wasn't going to be empty. He stopped. I want to be loved like that someday. I think everybody in this room wants to be loved like that someday. The kind of love that a person carries into the next morning and the morning after that every single morning for 9 years in a chair across from an empty chair. He shook his head. Mrs. Okafor, I did not have a word for what you just described. I do now. What word? She asked. Faithful, he said. Mabel looked at him. For a long moment she just looked at him. Then she said, that was his word. He used to call us faithful. He said we had been faithful to each other and to the morning and to the life we built. He said faithful was the right word for what we were. He was right, Steve Harvey said. He usually was, she said. She reached up and touched the earrings, Bernard's mother's earrings, the ones she wore for every occasion that mattered. Just a touch, a brief, reflexive touch. The way she looked at the card every morning and put it back. A small ceremony, a way of saying, I see you, I have not forgotten, you are part of this day. The audience began to rise, not all at once. One person first, then the woman next to her, then 4 people in the row behind. Then 200 people on their feet without having decided to stand, just standing, the way people stand when the legs carry them before the mind has finished weighing the decision. Talia walked to her grandmother. She stood next to her. She did not say anything. She just stood next to her, the way her grandmother had stood in Bernard's chair every morning for 9 years, close enough to feel the warmth of someone who was still there. Mabel took her granddaughter's hand. They stood together. The audience was still standing. Steve Harvey was standing too, now off to the side of the podium, doing the thing he did when the stage belonged to someone else, and his job was only to bear witness to it. He was witnessing it. The applause, when it came, was the sustained kind, not the kind that arrives fast and fades fast, the kind that stays. The kind where people are clapping and meaning it, putting something into the sound, the specific thing you put into applause when what you are applauding is not a performance but a life. Eventually, it settled. The family gathered. The Pryors, who were standing at the edge of the stage where the opposing team waits, were not competing for anything anymore. They were just people in a room who had been given something they had not come for and were grateful. The youngest Pryor, the 22-year-old who had been watching everything with absorbing attention, looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked at his mother. She looked back, a small look, a brief one, but anyone who knew what to look for would have recognized it, the look of two people who have just been reminded of something that matters. Steve Harvey walked back to the center of the stage. He had taken a moment, a real one. Not a host's pause, but a person's pause, the kind that you take when you need to find something to say that is worth saying and you are not yet sure you have found it. He had found it. "I have a question for this room," he said. "Not for the show, just as a question." He looked around at the audience. "How many people here have something they do that is a version of what Mrs. Okafor just described? Something private, something they do for someone they love or someone they've lost that they have never told anyone?" He waited, hands went up, not many at first. Then more, a man in the back row, a woman near the front, 3 people in the middle section not looking at each other, just raising their hands, about 30 people total. 30 people out of 200 who raised their hands to say, "Yes, I have a morning, I have a chair, I have a version of this thing you have just named." Steve looked at them. "Every single one of you," he said, "is doing something faithful." He looked back at Mabel. "And every single one of you learned it from someone." He paused. "For most of us, it was a person who sat across the table from us for long enough that we didn't know we were learning. We just thought we were having coffee." Mabel looked at him. She nodded once. "That is exactly right," she said. Steve Harvey looked at Esther, at Jerome, at Yolanda, at Talia. "Your grandmother," he said, "has been having coffee with your grandfather every morning for 64 years, 62 with him. 9 without him, and she has never missed a morning." He let that land. "I don't know what you came here expecting to take home today, but I know what you are taking home, and I know it is worth more than $30,000. Jerome, who sold insurance and understood the actuarial weight of things, looked at Steve Harvey and said, "Yeah, just that. Yeah. The way you agree with something that is true and that you did not fully understand until 5 minutes ago and that you will be thinking about for the rest of your life." Esther reached over and straightened the collar of her mother's gold blouse. It did not need straightening. It was just something to do with her hands when love didn't have anywhere else to go. Yolanda put her flashcard in her pocket. Whatever was going to happen next, she already had what she needed. Beat 9 Legacy Tale plus CTA, the Okafors went home without the $30,000. In the parking lot of the studio, waiting for their car, Jerome did a brief and mostly quiet calculation of what they had won in points and what they had needed, and concluded that it was close, that it had been genuinely close, and that under slightly different circumstances they might have made it. Mabel said, "Jerome." "Yeah," he said. "Stop counting," she said. He stopped counting. They flew home to Mobile on Thursday morning. Mabel sat by the window the whole flight, looking out at the clouds, which she had always found instructive, the way they moved without hurrying, the way they changed shape without seeming to decide to. Bernard had liked clouds. She had always pointed them out to him. On the plane, she pointed one out to no one. Then she smiled at it, the way you smile at something that doesn't need your smile but gets it anyway. When they landed in Mobile, Talia drove her grandmother home to the house on Beaumont Street. They sat together on the front porch for a little while. Talia had a question. She had been holding it since the studio, turning it over. "Grandma," she said, "when you sit in his chair in the morning, do you think he can hear you?" Mabel thought about this. "I think," she said slowly, "that when you love someone for 62 years, you know how they would answer every question you ever had. You know what they would say about the news. You know what they would say about the neighbor's dog. You know what they would say if you told them something that worried you or something that made you laugh." She looked at Talia. "So when I talk to him, I don't need to hear him. I already know what he would say. And hearing what I know he would say in my own voice, but it's his answer, that is enough. That is more than enough." Talia was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to start doing that," she said. "You don't have to wait until someone is gone," Mabel said. "You can do it with people who are still here. You can get up in the morning and choose to be awake with someone before the day begins. You can decide that the morning is shared." She paused. "It's better when they're there to share it, take my word for it." Talia nodded. She looked at her grandmother. She was 30 years old and sitting on a porch in Mobile, Alabama, with a woman who had been up before dawn every day since before Talia was born, sitting in a chair across from a chair, being faithful to a morning that had started before Talia existed and would continue in this form or some other form as long as Mabel was alive to keep it. She thought about what her grandmother had said in the studio. He does not drink his coffee anymore. She had said it simply, not dramatically. Not with the weight of grief she could have put on it. Simply the way you say something that is true and has been true long enough to be a settled thing. He does not drink his coffee anymore, but the morning is still ours. Grandma, Talia said, what do you talk about in the mornings? What do you say to him? Mabel looked out at the street in front of the house, the street she had lived on for 63 years. The magnolia tree at the edge of the yard that Bernard had planted in 1972 and that had since grown large enough to shade the whole left side of the porch in summer. Everything, she said. I talk about everything, same as always. She touched the earrings, Bernard's mother's earrings, the ones she wore for every occasion that mattered. He was a very good listener, she said again. He has not stopped. The morning after the show aired, Talia got up at 5:10. She made coffee. She sat down at her own table in her own apartment in Mobile, and she looked at the chair across from her. She thought about what she would say. She started talking. 64 years is a long time to do something every morning before the sun comes up. It is also, if you are doing it with the right person, no time at all. If this story found you, if it reminded you of someone or a morning or something faithful you carry that you have never quite put into words, then this channel is exactly where you belong. We tell the stories that happen quietly, in the early hours, in the chairs people sit in because they love someone and cannot imagine sitting anywhere else. Subscribe and we will keep finding them.